Okay. Hello, Yolanda.
Hi, Tiffy.
Welcome to the MBE project.
Yay. You know what? It's so funny why I made that face is because what a lot of people probably don't know is I always press record. So because of that, I usually intro because I know that it started, but I'm like, I need her to do the intro sometimes.
So as we normally do, we don't tell each other what happens. We just kind of like telepathically hope the other one picks it up.
Yes, as we do all things. How
Yeah.
are you this week, Sugar Pie?
Oh, just fantastic.
What did we do last? Oh, our community discussion was last time. Actually, it was a
Yeah.
lively little,
It was. There was
yeah.
a lot of interaction from our supporters, and it was really fun to have that.
Oh my God, it was so much fun.
Yeah.
It's like it's all coming back to me now. So, first of all, thank you guys for coming and showing up and
Yeah.
sharing with us. Because do you remember we started off kind of like,
A
where
little
are
bit
we
slow and a
going?
little bit dry.
Yeah,
And it was the energy of the people that really picked us up,
yeah. So
moved
you
us
guys could
along.
really help us out by showing up, and we enjoy the exchange.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, um, with that, here we are in a new week, a new topic. And I think we shared what the topic was going to be, but this is
Mhm.
really, you guys, like Tiffany's passion. Like, do you hear me? Yoga and chakras are
Uh-huh.
like at the top of her charts, and we're
It's true.
exploring chakras this week. So, honey, you want to lead us into this convo?
I do. I do. Well, the reason why I love the chakra system so much is, well, one, because I love personal development and self-awareness and, you know, moving through the experience of our lives with that kind of a support system. And the other part of it, I love philosophy and I love like ancient teachings. So once I came across the chakra system and marrying that into like what we know as modern day psychology, bringing those two together was really cool for me to see. And I think that the chakra system lends to us a really good outline of investigating ourselves and then kind of being able to not compartmentalize, but to just take pieces of it in an organized manner so that
Yeah,
we don't get overwhelmed.
that's a really good one. I think what you just said, like compartmentalizing, like looking at, because a lot of times it is overwhelming when we think about how many aspects of ourselves we have to look on and
Mm-hmm.
how many layers we have, and like on and on and on. And for the same reason, I do love the chakras. In fact, I don't know if I even heard of chakras prior to coming into this work. I genuinely, I don't know. But when I started in all of this, obviously it's like one of the things you hear about. But a lot of there's like a lot of basic information out there about them, and it made me curious about them to explore them in other ways. So I actually started going in my Akashic records and asking about the chakras, because I really wanted to understand them, because of the same way you've laid out. I understood there was like the system that I could use, almost like a
Mm-hmm.
roadmap I could follow to help me in my development. But another thing about them that I was so curious about is everyone always talked about their third eye. That's it. You know, like
Yeah.
everybody. It was like the third eye was like the cool kid on campus, right? And
Yeah.
I was like, well, what about the rest of them? So I'm glad that we're doing this conversation, and I'm glad that in my own exploration as well, that I came to appreciate the benefit of all of them
Mm-hmm.
and how working with all of them, I mean, really supports our alignment, our development, our the on and on and on and
Yeah.
on. So
It
how did
gives,
you get into them? Like,
well,
where did you?
actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking about it and I have no idea. I have no freaking idea. And this is kind of like how my life goes with this kind of stuff is that I find myself deeply engorged in it. And then I try to take a look back. I'm like, where did that even start? I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. So it could just be some seed that was planted in me just in my reincarnation.
That is so funny.
But also, as you were talking, what I really like about the chakra system too, what you were saying about just looking at the third eye chakra, um, when you look at all of them, it's a picture of just the holistic being,
Mhm.
right? And I mean, it kind of lends itself to what we experience with modern day medicine, you know, unless you're going to a naturopath or have a doctor that's really looking at all of the pieces that play into it, not just physical, but mental and emotional too. You don't get a complete picture and you're just treating a symptom. But with the chakra system, you can look at, it touches on every aspect. Every one of those is a piece of our whole being. So you can look at individual ones, and then you can look at how individually they play with each other. And sometimes 3 of your chakras are balanced and 4 are off, and you can figure out like what's the connection between these 4 being unbalanced right now, and how does that expressing in my personal life, and how do I manage it?
That's the really interesting thing with them. Once you do connect with them and work with them, and you know, working with your own especially, it's like sometimes depending on what's going on with you, like what you said, like how it's expressing itself, you will like know right away, like, oh, let me tune into a particular chakra, you know,
Right.
or just to see what is coming up for me. And now that I think about it, I mean, so probably Reiki class is where I first heard, or was like probably an energy work is where I first heard about chakras, somewhere in there. And again, I mean, there was, you know, the general outline of like the root chakra is like the foundation, and you know, and we'll talk about each chakra later, but then interestingly, around that time, because I was so curious about chakras, and I was curious about learning how to read oracle cards back then. And I don't know how I found her, but I ended up finding this woman who created an oracle deck based on the chakra cards. I mean, chakras. And she was the first person actually that I learned to read oracle cards through. It was my first oracle deck, but the whole deck was based on the chakra system. And so that also caused me to go deeper in exploration of them. Anyway, just randomly remembered that.
I had a thought and it just escaped me.
Come back.
I know.
Was it about the oracle cards? Do you have a chakra deck or something?
I don't. It was something before that you said. This is part of the problem when we work together on these things. There's so many ideas that come in.
Sorry, I had to do a quick like sniffle. So I wanted to mute to make sure it wasn't all in you guys' ear. I hopefully it'll come back to you.
Yeah, I hope so. It was a really good point.
I don't know, but the cards themselves, they did help me because of how the layout of the deck itself. They were very focused on looking at your different chakras based on what those chakras represented. So even if you did like a card spread and the borders of the cards, the colors correlated with the chakras too. So it was like part of the messaging. Anyway, so in your personal work though, how did you start out working with chakra energy, and how has that progressed? Like, where are you at now?
This is where the thought that left me went when you started talking about Reiki. So I don't know the initial. I'm sure I heard about it through yoga somehow, and then just my curious mind wanted to understand more. And then as I was reading about it, my brain that always wanted to be a psychologist pulled in like, oh, here's a format or a platform that we could use to understand our own psyche and like understand each other or help other people. But when I really started working with chakra energy, beyond just reading about it and journaling about it, I use it when I do my Reiki sessions. I start all of my Reiki sessions off with testing the chakras, and I use my pendulum for that. So I'll hold my pendulum over all 7 of the chakras, and what I get from that is information of seeing how the pendulum moves. Sometimes when it's balanced, I know that it moves in a right rotating circular motion. Sometimes it moves side to side, sometimes it doesn't move, and sometimes it goes backwards. So that gives me a good indication of what the energy in each chakra is doing, and it gives me a good platform of moving forward in the message I'm getting through the Reiki to help this person.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. It's something that people can play with too, if they're curious about chakra energy. And I think it's fun with the pendulum because you actually, like, you have a visual, like you have this tangible way of seeing the movement of energy in someone's field. And someone, just as a side note, since you mentioned it, we did receive a message, I think it was Gina, who asked if we could talk about pendulums. And Tiffany provided for her a link to an article that you wrote. So just, can you post that on the, because I don't think you put it on the MBE page. Can you post that link for people who may be curious about pendulums as well?
I will, for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing about the chakras too, getting to know the energy of it, I think a lot of times when we're not recognizing the energetic impact in our lives, whether it's like mental or emotional, sometimes we just take on energy and we'll take on more and more and more until we break. And sometimes that breaking point, if we're not getting the messages through how our behavior or through our emotions, then our physical body will be kind of the last resort to say, hey, get it together, take a look at this. And sometimes I think our physical bodies do align with which chakra would be imbalanced. You know, if you have hip pain or problems with your throat or shoulder issues, you know, like looking into the chakra and seeing what the definition of that chakra is, and then investigating your life around that, and then see how it helps possibly alleviate the physical ailments.
Well, it's interesting too. I think the behavior part is really highlights a lot as well, like our personal behaviors. Because when you said that, it made me think of back when I was, you know, taking every class under the sun, under the spirituality, metaphysical science, all these things. There was one class that I took in a particular modality. In that class, someone was like reading our chakras or something, and the woman got to my heart and she was like, oh my God, it's like caged off, like a little gate. And like, she described that my heart chakra was closed off, basically. And in my head, I'm thinking like, lady, first of all, I
don't judge me.
Problem being in relationships. I love my friends. I love my mom. You know, so like my logical mind was like, my heart chakra, girl, lady, you don't know nothing, right? But then later on, as I was going through my personal work and like really having it highlighted for me how much I was guarded, like the boundaries I had and how I wasn't totally vulnerable with people and myself to do, it like came back and highlighted for me like, oh, that's what it meant. My heart chakra was blocked. So sometimes too, like our behaviors can highlight for us which chakra may be not in balance, or even, you know, not just blocked or closed out, but even which ones are excessive, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting as well how that observation of ourselves can give us a lot of insight about our chakra activity.
Yeah. I think it will also give us steps to open up our eyes to something that is off in our life that we could investigate that maybe we're not paying attention to because we either don't want to deal with it, or subconsciously we've stifled it away because we really don't want to deal with it. And as we know, all the things that we don't deal with hinder and limit our fullest expression of this life.
Yep. No, totally. And it's the process of investigation too. I mean, I'm sure we'll like have some stuff. Tiffany's going to do the bonus content for Patreons, but even sometimes asking ourselves questions help us to understand the flow of our chakra energy. The pendulum thing is fun too. But so just again, like in your personal experience with it, like knowing that the chakras can be looked at as a roadmap and like used as a way to help your own, you know, awakening process, we'll say. It reminds me of how Carl Jung referred to them as the gateways of consciousness. But in your personal development, you could tell I'm like, whoo, come back. But in your personal development, really, like what have you learned? Because again, for those of you who may not know, Tiffany has a practice called Mind Your Chakras. So obviously this is a big, important, I mean, she believes in this work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what about them made you so like fall in love that you would even create Mind Your Chakras?
Well, because I think that it is such a great platform to utilize in self-discovery and self-healing.
Yeah.
that I found a lot of comfort in what they offered in being that outline. And because I tend to get very, very overwhelmed very easily with ideas and things in general. And I think the organization of the chakra system is something that I gravitate towards very much so. And then just the ancient mystical ideas about how they've worked and what I've learned about them through ancient teachings and just like the stories from deities and all the stuff that I've learned through my meditation and yoga practice. It's just, it seems like the most tangible way to put those things that I've learned that seem so mystical into our modern day world.
Yeah.
And to have it be effective.
Well, I love that gateway of consciousness thing too, because I think what I've found in my work with chakras as well is they literally are, I think of it as like they're literally streaming our consciousness. It's like this energy that may be held very specific to these various areas of our lives, just like, like what you were talking about, and, working on people, doing Reiki on people, and receiving messages or seeing or, knowing the different imprints that they're holding in their field. That also gave a lot of insight around chakras. Like, for example, like how much trauma is held in the lower chakras for so many people, whether it was sexual trauma, birthing trauma, like, whatever. I mean, it's amazing to see like what we hold and where, and again, like how it can affect more than one. So like a trauma would not just affect necessarily the root chakra, but it may affect your confidence, which would affect your solar plexus, like on and on. So yeah, I mean, it really is. It's almost like, now I'm saying it reminds me of like our personal libraries of information, of like our experiences, our thoughts, our feelings, all of these things. It's like literally being generated in our field.
I like that, personal libraries. But it also will bring things to light, like you said, it doesn't have to necessarily be like, oh, I have this root chakra trauma that has affected my confidence. It could be, maybe you have a confidence issue and you need to go the other way to figure out where that stemmed from. And then you might find that you need this other work to help you heal that.
Yeah. But that's why that whole self-investigation part is so important in this work, like, and every level you have to be an observer of yourself, whether it's like your behaviors, your triggers, your this or that, because they all are pointing to something.
Right.
And again, I mean, it's really cool and that's even part of when we talk about like chakras, and because a lot of people talk about chakra blocks and they talk about like balancing your chakras and all this. And like say if you are doing energy work on someone and their particular chakra, maybe the energy there was being stifled or restricted in some way, and then you start doing energy work and that energy starts to move, and then the person starts crying or they get emotional and they may not even necessarily know why, but it's just because those imprints start like flowing again, but then they have this beautiful release and an opportunity to work through things. So it's really, really cool as well that a lot of times we can witness something that speaks to managing the flow of our chakras.
Yeah. So
there's not on this planet right now.
You don't feel like you're on this planet right now?
Like,
it's okay. Yeah. I'm working on staying grounded in it too.
Yeah.
Shit. Where did it go? We're definitely, the spaceship has come to get us both intermittently.
I think because I did a guided meditation for some people this morning, and I still like, clearly I should have grounded better after. But I was saying about how sometimes we have like a something will happen in our life that speaks to what happens after rebalancing our chakras, like whether it's crying or like,
oh yes, that's what it was. So the healing crisis. This happens emotionally, but it's also a physical thing. If we're taking care of something that happens in our body, sometimes we get worse before we get better. And I think a lot of times we use that analogy to life things also. Like it has to get worse before it gets better. But that's same with chakra work. Like if you're diving in there to dig something up, you're going to dig it up and it's going to feel bad. But that quote unquote bad feeling is a release of the things that are moving through. So when we say it's blocked and you open the floodgates, it's got to flood out until it comes back and finds a homeostasis.
That is such a good thing to point out, because it reminds me of another heart chakra incident. When I was in my very first Reiki class, our teacher, she did something and she was balancing our chakras, maybe, I don't know, but she did something very specific in my heart area. Maybe it was rebalancing it. And that night I was actually taking a flight to the East Coast. And when I tell you, I felt like I felt like an empty shell of a human. It was the weirdest thing. It was like someone sucked my soul out, and I was just,
oh my goodness,
like, I had no feeling, like, I felt so weird. And I would have been afraid had I not already been in the thick of understanding, like, stuff shifts around.
yeah.
And I was nervous the whole flight of, like, am I going to come back to life? Like, what is this? Like, I just felt muted, gone. And then probably later that night or even the next day, I did feel back to myself. But it was such this weird experience of, like, what I felt initially after that balancing. I mean, I wouldn't describe it as feeling good.
Right. So the healing crisis. But since you're explaining that, the way that I perceive the heart chakra as well is that I see the three, and this is part of what my logo is. If you visit my website and see the logo, it's a triangle on the bottom, and then it's an upside down triangle above it, and there's a heart in between the diamond that the tops of the two triangles form. And the idea behind that is that the lower three chakras are our human chakras, kind of like our earthly, this is what you need to sustain being an actual physical human being. And then the top three are our spiritual chakras, so our connection to divinity. And the heart chakra is kind of where those two things come together. And so I think that the heart chakra bridges the gap between that. Aside from being love and like universal connectivity, it's the bridge of the human side and our spirit side. And I think a lot of times we're in denial of our own spirit and our own divinity. And that's why part of us blocking off our hearts comes from. So what you were feeling, I don't know, maybe it was that rush of like the integration of your spirit with your human.
Well, what you're saying too. By the way, I was listening to everything you said, but as you can see, I changed your name for your website so people can go check out Mind Your Chakras. Do you see it?
No, on this video that we're doing?
Yeah, like down in the corner of your name where it normally says Tiffany.
Oh, I do see it now.
So yeah. So anyway, yeah, it reminds me of, again, the importance of balancing all of the chakras and how it's not just to focus on just the third eye and just your intuitive development and just. And it's funny because one of the things too, I don't think a lot of people realize, I mean, there is a lot of excitement about focusing on the upper chakras, but without that groundedness of the lower chakras, you would be a space cadet, like woo-woo all the way out there, like no.
Been there, done that.
Yeah,
it's not worth it.
Honey, I mean, you could be, even look at me today, I'm like, I really need to ground, I'm aware. But I mean, like, you could go outshine. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it is very important to have that alignment of all of them. And I want to ask you about this too, like what you think about starting at the base, because I personally think it's such a good idea. If you're doing work on yourself, start at the root, and not just because it's the root, but I mean, for that connection to being embodied, being present, being grounded, that will help you out a whole lot before you start going.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Because when people ask me about the chakras, I like to give them the comparison of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for anybody who's not familiar with that, he was a psychologist that came up with this idea of how we grow and mature, essentially. And it's a triangle, and the very bottom is physiological needs, which are food, shelter, water, security. And that's exactly what the root chakra is. So they're similar. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then you can just assimilate that theory onto the chakras. And as you move up the line, the top of the triangle for Maslow is self-realization. And in between, there's like communication and emotional maturity. So as you move up the chakra system, it's the same as moving up Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
What you just said reminds me of priestess temple work and things like this. There's a book, I'm looking at my bookshelf, that's why I'm kind of zoned out. There's a book called Initiation. And is that the right one? Who knows? I might be lying, but I think I'm telling you the truth. There's a book called Initiation. Yeah, that's the one. And it was written by a woman who was a yoga teacher. And she actually opened like the first yoga studio in Europe. And this is a true story. And she became very well known for yoga and in the yoga community. But one of the interesting things about her story was she started having an awareness of her past lives. And one of the past lives, which this book is about, or her past life singular, it was about her being a high priestess in ancient Egypt. And so she would tell the story to her yoga students all the time about what she remembered about being a high priestess in ancient Egypt. And her students begged her and encouraged her to write the book and share the story with people. So she did. And it's it's a good book. No, it really is. I mean, you got to get through like the first 20 pages, but then it really picks up and it's really interesting. And the font is like Bible script, like tiny. So you might need a magnifying glass. The point is, what you're saying reminds me of, there's a part in the book where she talks about what she had to go through as an initiate to be a high priestess. And one of the things they said is how at that time, people had to experience life outside of the temple before going through their process of initiation. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason why it was so important is so that we, people, really have that experience of what it's like to like be embodied, be out here, have this very worldly experience before going into like the upper realms and all of these things, right? And a more modern lens, it reminds me of how so many of us do have like very worldly lives, like out here in this reality, until we at some point in our lives reach whatever prompts it. We have a lot of life experience before we start going up into these spirals of the self-discovery. So even though it's not like forced on us, it tends to be the same thing that we all go through, which again, just to your point, mirrors the chakras. It starts with being embodied, these very earthly concerns and experiences we have as we move our way up into this higher knowing and higher awareness.
You can't have a penthouse apartment unless you have a good foundation for the building.
Hey, yeah. Honey, I like that.
Right? And you need an elevator to get up there.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I was wondering how you were linking it back, but I get it. Yeah. We need to have the experiences of understanding what our basic needs are.
Yes.
And how those basic needs relate to what the next step is and how we learn. You know, I mean, some children are very wise, and sometimes they say things that are totally mind-blowing or so simple that you're like, look, I forgot about that. Like, I should be listening to these wise little people. Mm-hmm. But I mean, 9 times out of 10, as an adult, you're listening to a small child and they're talking about stuff you already know. Yeah. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. I know. You're dumb. Yeah. Just kidding. Yeah. But, you know, there's a level of learning that has to happen. Like, these kids aren't going to know and have all of the wisdom that we have because as we've grown into adulthood, we've had experiences.
Right. Okay, so since the chakras do mirror that in some ways, I want to make sure we go through each chakra, like share both of our experiences or insights or thoughts about what each chakra is before we go today, so that people can consider like how this shows up, how these particular energies show up in their own lives. So you want to start at the root?
I do. That's where we should start. Yeah. We don't want to start at the crown. Can't start at the penthouse. So yeah, the root chakra, it is, the verb for that is I have. So like to know that you have it, what you need, and stability, security, things that are actually going to physiologically keep you alive. Food, shelter, water, financial security, whatever the very basics of remaining alive are for you, that's that will help make your root chakra balance. And a lot of times I've seen that be unbalanced for people when they're moving or when they're changing careers or they lost their job. You know, it's not necessarily just like, oh, I don't have food or water and won't keep my physical body alive, but anything that which might threaten your security could throw your root chakra off.
Okay. And one thing I want to point out for people too, because there is so much information out there about chakras, and obviously each one, I mean, there's like endless information that ties into this. So what I'm going to share with you, probably, I'm glad that you're sharing that lens, like the traditional lens of the chakras. I'm going to share I guess my lens will be from like energy work. I don't know if that's, you know what I mean? But anyway,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Give it to us.
my focus of the root chakra, when I work with people with their chakras, it is bringing them back into body. So just like all of the things that what Tiffany said, that is absolutely root chakra specific, but I also love this chakra because it does help us to ground back into just being in this vehicle, because we are a lot of times not here. You know, we are out there in our future thoughts, in our whatever the heck, wherever we are. So I love working with this chakra for self-connection, like not connected out to the cosmos, nowhere, no, just being in this thing and being fully aware of being in this thing. So that's what I love about it.
Yeah. Why don't we just put this out there now that I'm going to cover probably the traditional and psychological aspects.
Yes.
And Yolanda will cover the energetics. I think that's
why
good.
We're such a good team.
I know. So next is the sacral chakra. And that's our center of creativity. It houses our reproductive organs. So it's actually like physically creating another human being, but it's also like our place of what we create and what our passions are, what we put out into the world. And it's also the chakra of emotions, and the element that's associated with is water. So being balanced in your emotions or understanding them and paying mind to that's where it lives in our sacral chakra.
Yeah. Interestingly,
the feeling chakra
was, what's interesting to me about this chakra is it reminds me of the energy of like, yes, what we feel, very specific to like our empathic nature, but also memory in a lot of ways. And I guess I should say this too, to point out, so you follow me along with what I'm talking about. The chakras, I often look at them from their correlation, the coming into the center. So like in the same way that the root chakra is very specific to connecting to yourself, and the crown is like connecting to all there is. When we come up this way and down this way, the sacral can be very connected to like memory, our old emotion, our old stories, like the things that trigger us. But then on this side, we also have the mind, but in a different way. But we'll get to that. But anyway, so the sacral chakra for me, I like to explore this energy a lot to tune into what we feel, like, again, our empathic nature, translating what we feel when we're empaths, like whatever I'm picking up on, starting to identify what's mine versus what's theirs. So I'm not taking on and responding from other people's energy, but also, again, that energy of remembrance, because there is so much that we respond from emotionally, but it's based on our history, our past. So that's what I like to investigate in that one.
Yeah, that's a good point. We definitely take on a lot of emotional traumas from our experiences, but also from our ancestors, you know, things that have been passed down from our parents. And we have absorbed that, we've inherited it, and we might not even recognize that those things are part of our current experience until we really investigate it and look at it and then release it, because it doesn't belong to us, but yet we're still having that experience.
Yeah, so many impressions passed down to us.
Mm-hmm.
And like
Okay.
even the root too, like thinking of like family roots, like yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot that has been
Oh
impressed
yeah.
in your field that just
Those roots just picking up
inherited
all the
it.
nutrients and toxins,
Uh-huh.
whatever they may be, going up the
Mhm.
line. Yeah.
Work your stuff out. Okay, sorry.
Hmm.
Okay.
So moving right along on up
Mhm.
the Shishima, if you will,
Yes. Do you want to tell them about the Shishima, the what's it,
the
Pingala and
Inga and Ida and Pingala.
Ida and Pingala? Well,
Yeah.
maybe at the end. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
go.
Okay. So the solar plexus, that is our center of power and
Do you
confidence.
notice I changed my posture when
Oh
we got
yeah,
to
I
this
know.
part?
I know. She
Woo!
hears solar plexus and she's like, "Look at it shine, everybody! Look at my solar plexus." We see it. It sure is bright. So solar plexus, it's solar. It's the sun. It's the center of being. It is your power, your confidence of who you are, and your right to be who you are out in the world. It's the chakra that says I can, and it supports you in like I can do this, I can do that because I am confident and this is my source of power.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just say the reason I changed my posture with this is because a lot of times when I tell people or teach people about their chakras, I always say with the solar plexus to check your posture because your posture will say a lot about like
Yeah.
how you are projecting out. And just like Tiffany said, it's your internal sun, honey. It's like I shine, I am here, like woo.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're like slouched over, like literally we
Covers it.
collapse or yeah, we
Yeah.
crunch down on our solar plexus. So our posture can say a lot about the energy that we're generating, especially correlating with that. But it also changes the way that we feel. Like if you just change your posture and like open up that heart and that solar plexus energy, like you just feel like more alert, like more engaged, more here, more present. And so I think that I like that idea that it also speaks to like our internal sun of like how you are allowing yourself to be seen, what you are projecting out into the world. And a lot of times we think of just like our heart, like, oh my love, I'm vulnerable and blah, blah, blah. I mean, this thing down here, this is like the protector, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's your personal power. So going back to what we said before about the importance of working your way up, I really believe that being in body, being in that root chakra energy is what supports you in feeling confident and safe. It all kind of see
Mm-hmm.
like it's a buildup.
Yeah, it is.
That's all.
Without that root and the foundation of security, none of these other chakras are going to feel safe.
Right.
Okay. Shall we move to the bridge, the heart chakra?
Amen.
So the heart chakra obviously is the chakra of love. And it's love that we give, it's love that we receive, it's the one consciousness love that we feel out in the universe. It is a tree just growing because that's what it does and giving oxygen. And like I said earlier, for me, I see it as the bridge between our human and our spirit sides. And obviously the verb for that is I love.
Ooh, I love. Okay, the heart chakra. When I think of the heart chakra, I do think about our vulnerability, and again, being supported by that confidence that of our solar plexus, really being open and vulnerable. But it also reminds me of like communication, which is it's like a blend of the two on either side of it, right? Like
Yeah.
confidence to be vulnerable, but also having the strength to be in your truth. It's like the heart is literally like, yeah. So I also see it as the bridge or the connector between the upper and the lower, where they meet, merge, and where we can really harmonize. It reminds me of too, like, how the left side of our body represents the feminine and the right represents the masculine, and like coming into that space, like even when we do this mudra, the praying hands, it's like a symbol of bringing in union our feminine and our masculine, our upper and our lower. So, I mean, it's amazing. No wonder why we are so protective of it. And one of the main things with the heart chakra I like to focus on is working through trusting that it's strong enough.
Yeah. So
like really, because we do protect it fiercely, but it's like we do that in a lot of ways because we don't know how strong we are. And I also think it's like a communicator, and I mean, not communicator, here, but the translator between the two, because there is, you know, this system of translation that happens between what you're experiencing in the middle, in the material realm, versus like your higher consciousness and what you experience out here. But there's this middle ground where the two converge, and you have to translate and bring them together to even have a deeper understanding of your entire experience and functionality.
I love that.
I love the heart.
I mean, I think we struggle with knowing how strong it is because it's unfathomable how to even conceptualize how strong it is. And interesting, we didn't mention this, but some people may know, some people may not, that there's colors associated with the chakras. It starts with red and it moves up to purple, but the heart is green. And since you're talking about blending, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Roy G. Biv, don't yellow and blue make green?
They sure do, honey. So, I never even thought about that.
Case in point.
Can't make these things up.
Nope. Yeah. Nope. That is just truth right there.
Gorgeous.
All right. Shall we move on? So the throat chakra is our communication center. It is how we express ourselves. And it is the power to speak what we need to speak. And it's part of our creativity too, because whatever we're communicating out, we're creating in our experience. We talked about the sacral chakra being the creative. Throat chakra is also creative in that how we communicate creates an energy around each experience as well. So a lot of times our throat chakra is unbalanced because we're not speaking our truth. We're not communicating how we need to be heard. So there's also a degree of the throat chakra being off in receiving communication and having an understanding of what else is coming at you.
Yeah. One of the big things to me with the throat chakra as well is creativity. And because, you know, there's power in our words, and what we speak are oftentimes, not always, because sometimes we hide some stuff, but it's often a reflection of what is going on for us internally. And the power of our voice. And if we have like insecurity, whatever we feel, like it comes out through our voice, you know. If we speak in a whisper, we sound like we're like, oh, nervous or whatever. Like our internal workings are projected a lot of times out in our voice, unless we're, you know, putting on a show and whatever. But it can reveal a lot of our own energetic imprints come forward in the projection of our voice. And like how I told you guys, I like match the root with the crown and the sacral with the third eye, the throat with the solar plexus, and the two together really speak to the energy of your authenticity. Because I mean, like, you have to be like in your power, radiating that internal sun and having that courage to speak your truth. But the throat for me mainly is like, it is that energy of alchemy. I mean, transformation, because it's so, think of how powerful your voice is. I mean, because even the tone that you use can impact the energy and mood of another person. Has someone ever yelled at you or they cursed at you? Whatever words flew out of their mouth and the tone and how they said it. Look at personal speakers, right? Or motivational, whatever, like a Tony Robbins. Listen, what he says, his messages are great, but how he says it, honey, gets everybody fired up. Do you see? So there's so much power in, like,
it's like their throat chakra goes straight to our solar plexus.
Yes, I'm seriously. It's like you have so much power here to affect change and transformation of energy. The throat chakra is no joke. Don't sleep on that thing. That thing right there. Woo! Power to the people.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I dig it. Well, moving on to one of my, I won't play favorites here, but I really like the third eye chakra.
Everybody has a favorite. Look, I just lost my mind over the throat. So, honey, my favorites. Take your third eye.
Fair. So the third eye is our center of intuition, and it's being able to seeing beyond just the illusion of what we've been taught and conditioned to see, but to see the messages beyond what we can conceptualize with our eyes. So you're seeing with your third eye. I get it confused because it flip-flops. So the crown chakra and the third eye chakra are both related with the pituitary and the pineal gland. And I've seen it both ways. So I'm still on the fence of where I sit with those two.
But
But
the
I
third eye literally is shaped like um the pine cone,
so it's the pineal
the
gland that the
pineal,
third eye
yes,
is.
with the
Okay.
third eye, and is affected by light.
Yes. Yeah.
But anyway, okay, go.
Yeah, I knew there was a lot of scientific stuff that lined up with that. Thank you for bringing that up because I didn't have it in my notes. It's somewhere else. But yeah, third eye is intuition, and it's being able to see with the knowledge that we already house inside of us without the limitation of what our eyes and our mind have been taught to see.
Sorry, I had on mute because my seaweed.
I
Just
know.
so you guys know, the reason I crave seaweed so much is because um I have something called thalassemia, and my body thinks it's anemic, but it's not. Whole situation. Anyway, I like crave like iron and stuff. So no judgment, okay? Thank you.
No judgment here.
Even though I don't really process it, but beside all points. So the third eye to me, okay, again with my correlation between the upper and the lower, it correlates with the sacral. And what's interesting to me with this, I mean, we're going to bring in tarot here, is like, yes, the third eye is connected with our intuitive mind, and the sacral is connected with that element of water. And so the two combined, it also the moon, the sacral is also related to the moon, but the two combined, it really makes me think of the energy of the high priestess in tarot. And the high priestess card is about being able to access behind the veil that is behind her. But the thing is that it's like she's not just like guarding the secrets. I mean, it's really about you understanding that you have access to this higher knowledge, this higher wisdom, this higher vision, this ability to see beyond just the physical realm and to see from a higher lens. Because with your third eye, like, yes, you can see intuitively, which is to say, like, yeah, you may be able to see or translate what is in non-physical form, but to see from that higher lens of the intuitive mind is also to be able to see beyond the surface of what is here in form. So, for example, you could look at a human being, and like I'm looking at Tiffany, I see what she looks like on the surface, but with my intuitive mind, I will look at her beyond her surface of what I see, and where my analytical mind will try to judge that book by its cover, right? My one quote that I came up with one day was, don't judge the divine by his or her cover. And I think that speaks to the intuitive or the third eye, because it helps us to see everything in another way, through another lens of perception. But one of the most significant things about it, what I like to focus on with the third eye, is I think more importantly, it helps you to see you in a new way. It helps you to finally get to see you and understand yourself beyond your stories, beyond your teaching, beyond blah, 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 and all this other stuff that is going on in these other chakras. It is through that intuitive mind that you can really tune in and understand like the depth of meaning behind all of this energetic coding that's in your own field. I'm done. I got a cough.
I watched a short documentary this morning on Ram Dass. It's on Netflix. And he wrote the book Be Here Now and a bunch of other books. But I took a few notes on my phone when I was watching it because he just said some things that I was like, oh, I need to take note of that. And it's just interesting that you brought up the veil, because one of the things that I wrote down was he said that going through the veil is part of spiritual practice and dying. So the and dying part is added on because he's close to 90 and he suffered a stroke, but he was talking about how, like, when we go through this veil, this illusion of what this physical form is, that there's so much more to see and thus feel and therefore integrate into our experience now.
It's interesting that you say dying too, because in a lot of this work, like I call it death cycles, we go through death cycles. And even like like resurrection, like the biblical term of resurrecting, or like people getting baptized and they call it being born again. I think there are a lot of hints to in different religious texts and ancient teachings and philosophies that talk about this dying and rebirth, this death and rebirth, but that a lot of it is about dying while we're alive, like not the physical death, even though that is like obviously a huge transitional point, but even the process of dying to, like we could say dying to the ego, or like dying, shedding, transforming out of our old skins of, you know, thoughts or perspective in these things. And obviously if we go through the work of like the chakras, like you just were saying, the outline of them, like working from the root up through all these different layers of ourselves, you will. And even like the heart might be like that passageway of like, you know, like here is where I die and I'm reborn again into this new awareness. And by the time you get to your third eye, I mean, like after constant work on ourselves, I mean, this goes on for years. Okay. So
I don't
like,
know that it ends.
you know, it's just, it keeps going.
There's no destination.
Why I think there's death cycles. Like we die
Yeah.
many times while we're
Sure.
alive and are reborn into new awareness many times. And I think that speaks to the expansion of the third eye, because a lot of people talk about like, oh, my third eye is opening, and they may have had an experience where they're like, whoa, all of a sudden I'm online and I'm intuitive and I see, and they think that's the end. No, it keeps expanding. So it's like, you keep going. Anyway, that's all I had to say about that.
One of my favorite bands, I quote them often, but there's a song and in it says spiral out, keep going. And it's talking about that expansion of consciousness over and over again. And like, it doesn't stop. You have to keep pursuing that which is in front of you, because there is no end game in it.
Yeah.
There's more to everything that we see and everything that this physical form can show us.
Honey, amen. High five up top. My last podcast I just did yesterday was about that expanding meaning in our lives. And it was like, I don't.
Yeah.
You guys can listen if you want. Okay, what's our next chakra?
Right. So the seventh chakra is the crown chakra. Right here, sits on the top of our head, the crown, and it has to do with
adjust your crown.
I love that. I love that so much. That's Yolanda's little tagline, and I think it's so great because it's so true. It is the chakra of understanding. So really understanding and knowing that we as individuals are part of this whole, and that we're all connected, and that we have an effect on each other, and we're all from the same essence, whatever you want that to be, biologically or spiritually, energetically. Like we are all the same underneath. And it's an understanding and a connection to spirit, divine, something that's greater, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, that there's a connection that we have to it, and that we're also a part of it. So a lot of times this chakra is imbalanced because we lose sight of our own divinity, and we lose sight that we are a part of this piece of pure perfection. And I think that's always really interesting when I see people's crown chakras unbalanced, or when mine gets unbalanced, to have that as a signal and be like, okay, what's it doing to the rest of these? Because that's really fucking my shit up.
Yeah. But it's interesting you say that. It reminds me too of how that chakra out of balance can also put people in the space of like illusion or delusion.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something we can make sure to talk about next week. Like we're publicly taking a note of it, is talking about what our energies, like what we may display if a particular chakra is maybe running low or excessive. Because like with the crown chakra, just like what Tiffany said, a lot of us, it is associated with, like, some people consider it like our spirituality, our connection to one, to all of this. But again, if it's shut down or out of balance, it could display in some interesting ways. But anyway, so the crown chakra for me, I do think of it a lot as like coming online. Like, I think in a lot of ways of how people may interpret the third eye is more so how I see the crown. And part of that is because when I am receiving messages or channeling, what I feel expand is my crown. So it's almost like my crown is, I recognize it as like the coming online, and then that information flowing down through into my, anyway, it doesn't matter. But how I was saying again, my connection with the upper and the lower. So how the root chakra is connecting us to ourselves, and the crown is that knowing or understanding that we are connected to all there is. We are one with all there is. I think it speaks also to that importance of balancing all of them and being in that alignment, because if you are not grounded into your person, into your being, and you just are solely out here, out there in that sea of, oh, I'm one with all that exists, I think that speaks a lot to people not knowing who they are, and people maybe trying to emulate other people, or, taking on so many different characters because they're not quite sure about who they are. They're just kind of like, taking on the impressions of everything around them and trying to, it's lost. You can get really lost out here if you're not really grounded into your person.
Well, I'm gonna pull in astrology to that a little bit, because as we know, the zodiac is a circle with all the different signs, and it's, as Yolanda has taught me, it's an evolution of our individuality as well as our connectedness. So it's this journey through understanding how do we incarnate as these individuals, but also know that we're still part of this big picture, and going through those phases, those growth phases and maturity. And if you're sitting there listening, you're thinking, oh, well, I'm a Leo, or I'm just an Aquarius, like I stop here, like those are my only characteristics. Take a look at your birth chart.
Did you do that on purpose?
I did not. I did not. I held them both here though, so that was good.
They are opposite sides.
Yes. Good. My osmosis is working. Just posters up around my house. It's getting in there. But so again, if you're hearing this and thinking, oh, I'm just one of these signs, well, take a look at your birth chart, because you have all of the signs in your birth chart and they function differently. So this evolution of being an individual and also a part of the one consciousness, it's all holistic for all of us.
Well, that's the thing I love about all of these tools, really, because they all speak to our evolution of consciousness. It's like just different languages that are telling you the same thing, pretty much,
Yeah.
And like maybe you are more attracted to astrology, and you can absolutely see the evolution of your personal journey of consciousness and understanding, going from Aries to Pisces. And yes, and then the same with the chakras. You can follow that pathway, root to crown, and it speaks so much to this human experience and what it means to be in body while also being one with all that exists. I mean, all of it. Reiki, the Reiki symbols speak to the exact same thing. Tarot, there's the Fool's Journey in that deck that speaks to the exact same thing. So yeah, and the reason I love tapping into all of these different modalities and tools is because I feel like each of them, even though they are pointing back to the same thing, essentially, each one of them kind of like creates different ahas for us, because they paint the pictures so differently.
Yes.
They each kind of make you go, oh, so you could look at the chakras and then all of a sudden have an aha about astrology or about this or that. But all of it is waking you up and ahaing about you. I love this stuff.
I know, it's so good. We're so lucky to have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we went through all 7.
We did.
And like we said, for the Patreons, Tiffany is going to put something really good for you guys.
Yes.
And for everyone else, next week we will be sure to maybe talk about some of what it looks like when we're out of balance versus imbalance and what that even means. But we also have our community discussion next week. So we would love for you to be there live so that we can all talk about this together, because we love it.
And in the meantime, if you can't show up for the live event or during the week you think of something, please share any thoughts or comments, questions, experiences. We'd love to have anything that's a tipping point for us to move the conversation in a direction that is supportive for our community.
Yes. And I just want to point out for, my mind just went blank. God, I say her name every week. Who's our love bug that asked about yoga?
Bryn.
No.
Bryn didn't ask about yoga?
Nope.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Positive. Shit. Oh my God. My mind just went blank. I know your name starts with a J. I could see like the whole thing. My mind just went, I'm so sorry, honey. But you know, I mean, we say your name every week, so you know we know you.
Joe.
But, yes.
It was Joe that asked?
Yes,
okay.
It was Joe. Gee, like I couldn't see the O, one letter.
But I know. Anyway, but I realized that I was like, that's funny. It's only 2 letters.
Yeah. Joe, we are going to talk about yoga, so don't think that we forgot about you, honey. Yeah. We do. But because it is such a meaty topic, and again, another one of Tiffany's passions. I mean, I love it too, but she like loves it.
Yes, true.
We are going to make sure that that is our next topic. So just wanted to point out for you that we aren't overlooking that request.
Yeah. We hear you, see you, and we will deliver.
Yeah. So is there anything you want to tell everybody or any suggestion you have of like if people do want to play with this week, is there something just very simple that you recommend that maybe?
I think very simply just getting a look at what's an overview of it, a general overview of the chakras, and then maybe just there's 7 chakras or 7 days. So maybe take a chakra each day and just do a little journaling about what that chakra means in your life, or maybe things that are going on in your life that are related to that chakra, and just see what that starts to uncover.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
That's a really good one. And as always, please share on the Facebook page, like what comes up for you, what chakra, whatever your insights are, because we love, love, love to hear about it. Mm-hmm. And as always, we thank you. Special thank you to our Patreons. We really appreciate the support. If you all enjoy the podcast and want extra content, you can become a Patreon. Just go to mbeproject.com for more info on that.
Yeah.
You ready, babes?
I'm ready. Thank you for being here with us.
Bye, everyone.